All right. So we should be recording. So Jessica, go ahead if you want to introduce yourself and take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. I'm Jessica Thrasher. I'm the Water Equity Program Leader at the Colorado Water Center, which is a division within OEE. So we're really looking to see other ways that we can provide education and support all of you in the communities that you're in and the great work that you're already doing. So if you are not familiar with the Water Center, just very briefly, we are based at the Fort Collins CSU location, and our mission is to address water issues affecting Colorado communities through collaboration, engagement, education and training, and applied research. We have three main focus areas. One is water workforce development, water equity, which is the program that I run, and agricultural water management. Side note on our water workforce development, we are having an annual water workforce career fair, and I can provide more information about that event after this, but that will be held. We had one in April of this year, and we'll have another one in probably March of next year. So that's a great way to engage with the youth if you are connecting with them and let them know there are a lot of opportunities to engage in the water field. So I mentioned I'm Jessica Thrasher. I have been doing rain barrel workshops for quite some time. I've been with CSU for almost 4 years in a couple of different capacities and have done these workshops through both of those. And then prior to this, I also owned my own company and delivered rainwater harvesting education. So today, I'm really excited to share with you all of that you need to know to host these in your own communities. I am still receiving a lot of requests to do rain barrel workshops, and I thought what better way to meet this need in the community than to train all of you to be able to do these as well. I'm seeing a lot more interest in rain barrel workshops from when I started. And this is because there's really an increased community awareness of the water shortages and drought that we've been having. Also, water costs have been increasing, especially in our outdoor landscapes. And so rain barrel workshops are a really great educational tool to be able to teach communities about water education, but in a really engaging and empowering way, which helps them to take action in their own homes and neighborhoods. And so some folks that I work with call it kind of the gateway introduction to water conservation, and then you can build upon workshops after this. So today I'll be providing you with, or after this workshop rather, the editable PowerPoint slides that you can take and use and adjust to how it works best for your communities. Also, we have rain barrel installation guides in English and Spanish, and there's also free rain barrel class recordings, also in English and Spanish. So you will have those resources to follow up with later. And I will also be available if you have questions or concerns as you're starting to plan for your rain barrel classes, and happy to do that as well. So first thing we're going to do is talk about some translation and interpretation resources that OEE has. There is part of the work that I do is really focusing in on language justice and making sure that we have translated information around water education specifically, because in the water field right now, the main education available is in English. And we have a lot of people who we want to be involved in protecting our water who right now don't have the ability to access that education. So those resources, OEE has those, and then I'll also be sharing some best practices. Then talking about how much does it cost to run a workshop? What are some funding opportunities? Some different ways that you could host your workshop. There's options, and I've done them multiple ways as well. What supplies you'll need. If you are going to transport rain barrels, how do you do that? Then I provide a presentation, like what you would be receiving as the editable PowerPoint. And then we'll go through how do you actually install so that you can speak to that with your community members. So moving into equitable access to information. Just making sure that everyone is on the same page regarding definitions. So there is a difference between interpretation and translation. Interpretation is like simultaneously translating, like during this, for example, if there was an interpreter on this webinar, then they would be translating my words as I was saying them. So when I first started doing translation and interpretation, I thought that if I was delivering a class, that I would have to say like welcome and then pause, and then the interpreter would say bienvenidos. And so the presentation would take twice as long. But I have now come to understand that actually it is happening at the exact same time. It is simultaneous, and that the workshops are not longer because of it. Translation is taking the written content that you have and having it be in another language. So that's the written interpretation is really the simultaneous talking and translation of your presentation. I've worked a lot with Community Language Co-op, and that is also who OEE partners with as well. But there is a different process through OEE, and so I have my next slide will be going over that. But in case you need additional resources, I'm also including the link to Community Language Cooperative. What's really neat about them is that they provide these translation devices as pictured here on the screen. I always describe them as an iPod. I know, like, who has an iPod anymore? But anyway, it's about the size of an iPod, that small musical device from the olden times, as my kids would say. And it is like a little radio, and then the person who is doing the interpretation is on the same channel, and they're usually, if it's an in-person event, they're translating in the same room, or if it's a virtual event, then it's kind of like a separate room that folks would go into. For OEE, I have included a QR code to the page where you can find these additional resources for language access and accommodation. There is a request form, this marketing and communications request form, and that you can go through to see like what funding is available. There is a budget to provide that interpretation and translation services, so be sure to check with the DEI division to see what your area would qualify for, to see, what resources are available, or if you need to look for additional funding for that. But they would be able to help you with those. When doing bilingual events, I will also be sharing with you this tip sheet that I created. I have this screenshots to show you of how to set up your Zoom platform so that you can have interpretation, because there is a learning curve and I have made all the mistakes so that you don't have to. One big thing is on Zoom. I know Zoom is available for a lot of different areas and communities, but you have to select a certain button in order for the interpretation to show up. And then conducting a practice session is really important, making sure that you have translated all of the marketing materials, registration forms, event emails, presentation slides beforehand. The slides that I will be sharing with you are already bilingual, but if you make changes to them, you would need to have those translated. And the neat feature that Zoom now has is you can record it in multiple languages, but there are certain ways that you have to set it up to be able to do this. And so it's kind of like the secret code to be able to record in English and Spanish at the same time. And then you can then provide those recordings to the community. Additionally, we recently found out that all of the different offices, extension offices, were provided at one point with this rain barrel diverter and parts kit from the Earth-minded diverter. And so it looks like this. And so if you are looking in your extension office, you can potentially find this kit for you. Michaela did find the kit for Weld County. And so these learning kind of resources might be available for you in your office as well. And we'll be going through what is in that kit and how to use them throughout this presentation. Also, I have question breaks, but if you have a question, feel free to come off of mute and ask it as you have it. So the workshop costs for the rain barrels can vary. The rain barrels themselves can be $30, dollars onward. You can get really fancy rain barrels that can be very expensive. But there are opportunities to get or source rain barrels for free or low cost, and I'll be sharing those with you. But if you're going to provide rain barrels during your workshop, then just know that that will add quite a bit of cost to the event. Then you have the connection kit. So what is connecting the rain barrel to the downspout or the house? And so those connector kits are something additional that I typically provide when I do rain barrel workshops. And Colorado Raincatcher is who I partner with. They are local to Colorado and will ship connection kits to you. I put the date that I have this cost estimate here because inflation and in the past, my prices had changed because of the cost of inflation. So this is the current cost of the connector kits, but just note that those sometimes do increase. Staff time, of course, for planning. I have used volunteers for that and partnerships to help spread out the amount of time that folks are having to dedicate to planning a workshop, but it shouldn't take more than 10 hours or so of staff time. Your location and planning, there are a lot of free spaces for workshops. And in the past, when I have done these, I have partnered with organizations that have workshop space already available. And in the extension offices, I'm not sure if you have education spaces or not. And I see some head nods. Thank you, Monica. But that would be something else just to consider if you're going to use, is your space large enough for how big of an event that you want to have? Or do you need to partner with someone else to have that workshop in a larger location, or do you need to rent a space? And then tools and paint are both optional. And the reason why I say those is because some folks who have done the rain barrel workshops in the past have included a component where people can drill into their barrels or paint them afterwards. And so this is completely an option that you have. There would be more moving parts. You'd have to bring the tools and you'd have to purchase the paint as well. Funding. So charging a registration fee, for the classes that I have done, I have charged a registration fee. I try to keep it as low as possible and offer scholarships, but having at least a small cost then helps people to show up. I think we've all had those free events where folks sign up but then do not attend. So by having that small cost, it really helps with having like skin in the game, or having people have contributed to the cost and are more willing to attend those events. Scholarships also are very beneficial because whenever I've offered scholarships, they have been all used and requested. And so just keeping in mind that by opening up to scholarships, more community members who are lower income could also participate. And so that is a very beneficial thing to include. How I've done scholarships in the past is partnering. So asking a water organization to maybe sponsor the scholarships. And so then you can provide those materials for free. I've also looked for grants to help with these projects. River Networks Project Rain Barrel, all of these blue lettering that you see are links, and you'll receive this presentation with all the links afterwards. They have been doing their Project Rain Barrel program for multiple years. And right now, if you go to their website, you'll see that the program is on hold, but you can apply to receive free kits from that program. And then they connect you with someone from Coca-Cola, which is who they partner with, to get free rain barrels as well. So you'll receive this link and you can contact the River Network staff person to ask more about that program and see, are they going to be offering those scholarships or grants rather for Project Rain Barrel maybe later in the year. Additionally, how you partner and who you partner with will depend on what grants you have available. I've partnered with neighborhoods, like neighborhood groups have come to me. Some municipalities offer grants to neighborhood sustainability efforts. And so by having them apply for those grants, and then they want to cover the rain barrels and the kits for, a certain number of folks in their neighborhood. So that's been very successful. Additionally, I've worked with municipalities who maybe offer a lower, they haven't done rebates yet, but I think that would be something to explore if you have good connections with water providers in your area. But sometimes they just sponsor the entire event, and so then you can offer those really low cost tickets to the event. And I've also worked with nonprofits. So here are some flyers for some organizations that I've partnered with in the past. Arapahoe County, we worked together to do rain barrel workshops in 2022 and 2023. And now they, from this image on the screen, they're partnering with 4 different organizations to do these rain barrel workshops. Lisa Nur with Arapahoe County. So if you're in Arapahoe County, this would be a great group to connect with, because then you could maybe say, we could partner to offer an additional rain barrel workshop. What Lisa told me was that they were offering 3 rain barrel workshops a year with 30 participants per workshop, and they were filling up immediately. So there's a huge interest in these programs. And so, I think now is definitely the time to work with organizations to offer them. I additionally worked with the park people in Denver, and you can see there's the city and county of Denver is participating, Denver Water. So there's lots of really neat partnership opportunities. And finally, breweries. I have done multiple events with breweries, and they're in the Fort Collins area. There's a specific group of staff from breweries who have a clean water initiative. So there are, additionally with breweries, sometimes they have barrels, 55-gallon barrels, which we'll talk about, because they get fruit in them to have fruited beers. Or if it's a winery, kind of the same thing. So they would be another organization that you could partner with and potentially find those barrels and find a location. There are a couple different ways that I've done rain barrel workshops, hosting them. I've done, especially during COVID, of course, I did virtual workshops and then a drive-through rain barrel pickup. And then I've also done the in-person. So I'll tell you how to do both, and then you can determine what would work best for your area. With the virtual drive-through rain barrel pickup events, for your location, having the pickup events in a parking lot works really well, but not if it's a busy location. So I highly suggest that on the day of your event, just having that parking lot not being used by the business or organization that has that parking lot. So having a place where people can pull in fully inside the parking lot rather than having them have to stop along the street, because people do, it can be a long line of cars. And then having an easy way for cars to line up, pick up the barrels, and then exit. Additionally, barrel storage. When you're picking a location, and this may or may not be true for your county office, is you need to have a place to store the barrels. The 30 rain barrels will take up quite a bit of space. So even though they're light, they just are large. So if you're partnering with another organization, can they store the barrels for you so that you don't have to move them twice, would be my recommendation. And then having staff and volunteers to do this drive-through pickup event. Again, the barrels are light, but it's really nice to be able to have help for folks loading them in their cars. And then if you're having a bilingual or multilingual event, highly recommend having that bilingual staff and volunteers to assist with the loading of the cars. For technology, if you're going to have one language, of course, you'll need some sort of virtual platform. I use Zoom. I know that this is what the platform we're using today, but of course, we also have Teams, there's Google Meets, etc. And that's pretty straightforward as far as one language goes. For bilingual or multilingual events, I would recommend Zoom. I know there are other platforms that also work well with interpretation, but I'm most familiar with Zoom. So you would need to make sure that you have the interpretation feature. Most Zoom accounts do. And so I'm happy to stay on and answer questions. And then I'll be sending that tips sheet as well, which tells you exactly where to find out if you have that feature too. You need to make sure that you have hired an interpreter for the day of the event, translated all of the materials, the registration form. And I'll say the registration form again, because with some registration form platforms, you can't edit. Some of the words are hard coded in, which I have found out through working on multiple platforms. So you have to get creative on how and where you can put that interpretation or that translation of like name, location, address, etc. The information that you're collecting for registration. And then the thank you emails and links to the materials will also need to be translated. The presentation slides as well will need to be bilingual. So when you're hosting an event in Zoom, everybody will see the same presentation, even though there are two different rooms where folks will be. There'll be an English room and let's say a Spanish room, but everyone sees the same presentation. So all of my presentations are bilingual and everybody will see both languages and then be able to follow along. Any questions? I'm just going to pause there to see if we have any questions so far.
I do. I have a question. I'm wondering like if you are bilingual, like do you have any best practices on like leading something without translation where you like lead the same event in both languages?
So
Um,
for example,
yeah.
you would be bilingual and so you wanted to do both sides.
Yeah, or do you find that it's easier to do like one event in Spanish and one event in English in that case?
I would separate them because that's a lot, I would say,
Mhm.
for one person. I personally am not fluent in Spanish, so I know that I could not do it that way, but I think it's also, it will take double the time as well.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Of course. But that's great that you have that skill set and that you would be able to offer one in English and one in Spanish. I think there's a lot of benefit to having the separate, let's say, for example, in person, the separate workshops, because then you potentially get different questions. But then I also find that having bilingual events is also very beneficial because then folks know that there are these other opportunities and, more awareness around, hey, there's more than one language spoken in my area. And I've also found that folks who have attended my presentations that have been bilingual are like, oh, I wonder how I can incorporate that into my education. So I think it's a great opportunity all the way around. In-person rain barrel workshops. This one is one of the events I did at Odell Brewing Company. And they had saved these rain barrels, a lot of them from their fruit beers that they do. When you're doing your in-person workshops, really partners. I love bringing people together. I love partnering because it really just expands opportunities for you to either maybe have more than one event, reach a different audience, and then have this kind of momentum going in your area. Maybe folks would love to, sponsor it or participate in it if they knew about it. And so there are a lot of really great opportunities to collaborate. When you have a partner, you can help with the location, they can help with volunteers, again, that marketing. Um, this is a picture from when I partnered with a neighborhood group. And so this was, I have to say, this is the only presentation I've given outside. Most of my presentations are inside, but this was a backyard presentation, which was really interesting and valuable for the community to come together in that space. Again, just highlighting that there's potential rental fees. When you're planning as well, and I didn't put this on the slide, but leveraging existing days. So for example, like World Water Day, Water Quality Days, are there Earth Day? Are there special days that you can participate in an ongoing effort in your community around awareness around environmental events or water events? For World Water Day in particular, there is a a sign-up sheet where you can, for like the national program, where you can get your event listed on there. Local groups like River Network, they can also promote your event. And so I have seen a lot of success and momentum around having events around those special days. If you're providing the barrels, of course, the space to store them, but then what happens to the barrels that were not picked up? So just a plan for what to do with them afterwards. Where will they be stored? Can you use them for a next event, etc. Your rain barrel connection kits, I would recommend ordering those 2 weeks in advance. And then how many people to have at your workshop? Just from personal preference, I find that 30 is a really great number. And that's because it's not too big that people don't feel like they can ask questions or engage. And it's a manageable group. Much larger than 30, I think it just gets to be just a really big. So additionally, with 30, that's about the max number of rain barrels that I've been able to get in one location. They're large, they take a while to get that many. And so that's another reason for the cap at 30 for the barrel, providing the barrels. I've also done large events where it's education only. And so you can include more participants. And of course, if you have an online course or class, then that could include more as well. Where to get your rain barrels? The local Coca-Cola facility, I know for sure there's one in Denver. I don't know if there are other locations of the Coca-Cola facilities, but what happens is they have, and I'll provide more information on the next slide, but they partner with the River Network Project Rain Barrel program, and they have these 35 or 55 gallon barrels, and they would have to take them to the landfill. So this is a really great opportunity to help them, really save them money because they're having to pay to get rid of them, and then upcycling those barrels that have already been used. Longmont Container Reclaimer is another location, and I know the folks who would be watching this or on this call now are potentially not from the Front Range. I am most familiar with the providers on the Front Range, so I'll put these here, and if you are in an area that is not on the Front Range, I would love to work with you to see how I can connect you to a more local provider to where you are. So Longmont Container Reclaimer, they have their previously used barrels, and it's funny because I've gotten a lot of barrels from them. They are cheaper than the other places like Colorado Raincatcher that I've worked with as well, but they're also not rinsed. And so the barrels that I have gotten have been like soy sauce. I mean, that's a lot of soy sauce. 55 gallons of soy sauce, that's a lot. Sometimes they'll have other things in them, which is perfectly fine, but you just need to know that you will need to allocate additional time to make sure they're all pre-rinsed for the people who will be picking them up, or at least give them a heads up that they will need to be rinsed afterwards. Colorado Raincatcher has rain barrels as well. These ones are rinsed. And then they also have a bundle of a rain barrel and the connection kit, and that's $88 right now. And then Blue Barrel Systems is nationwide. So the Container Reclaimer and Colorado Raincatcher are both local to Colorado. Blue Barrels is a national program. Fun fact, the executive director was a CSU grad. So that's really fun. What Blue Barrel does is they partner with local rain barrel providers. So for example, they partner with Container Reclaimer specifically to get barrels in communities. But what they do have is a really cool, and I've spent a lot of time on this website, tools, rain barrel tools section. And so I'll be linking that for you as well, because there is a irrigation timer for rain barrels that you could do. There's a drip system. They have, anyway, a bunch of really neat tools. And if you want to geek out about it with me, I'd love to talk more about it later. There are local restore places, so Resource Central or like a Habitat for Humanity or other organizations that are providing reused materials are great to look at as well, but you never know what they will have on stock or how many they will have. But if you're able to have someone go check out those places, those would be a good resource as well. My only caveat to that is all of the barrels have to be food grade. So these barrels, these size barrels are also used for chemicals. Early when I was doing these rain barrel workshops, I needed 50 rain barrels because I thought that I could do 50. And since when I went to try to find 50, I found out, you know what? I should have done 30. Anyway, so Facebook Marketplace, I contacted this seller who said they had 50 rain barrels, and I asked them if it was food grade, and they're like, yeah, it had food grade soap in it. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll rinse it out and that's fine. I get there and all of the barrels actually with the label on there were hydrochloric acid. So I did not buy those rain barrels because best practice for rinsing the barrels after they had chemicals in them is 3 rinses. So you might even hear, oh, well, they've been rinsed, they're fine. But the chemicals leach into the plastic. And then when you have rainwater sitting in them, those chemicals will leach back into the water. And you don't want to put that on food, on your plants. So it has to be food grade. Here's the information about Coca-Cola. This person, Lexi, this might be old information, but I just included it just in case. Lexi was the sustainability specialist and might still be the sustainability specialist who you would contact to organize picking up the barrels. They're also called drums. With Coca-Cola, you're never really sure if you will get 35-gallon or 55-gallon. So just know that ahead of time. You might be able to pick and choose when you're there. That would be something that you would need to coordinate beforehand. Be sure to pick up your barrels 1 week before the event. Usually Coca-Cola has white drums. These would also need to be rinsed. Of course, they will have the syrup in them. And if they're white, they do have to be painted. Not necessarily by you, but by someone. Because if white barrels, more sunlight can enter into the barrels and then algae. You'll have more algae growth in those barrels. When you are picking up your barrels, most likely you will have to transport them. I have not found a place that will bring them to me yet. So that's another great reason if you partner with an organization that already has the barrels, then you don't then have to transport them. But if you do have to transport them, you will need a trailer for sure. You can borrow one, make sure you strap it down. That's just a public service announcement. I have done I haven't personally driven the barrels without straps, but those are light enough that especially on the interstate, those will fly off. So please secure your load. I don't want you to be like, well, Jessica said, and then you have barrels everywhere on the interstate. Additionally, you can rent a U-Haul. U-Haul has this truck donation program, which is linked here with 501c3 nonprofits. It's a 3-week lead time to request a truck. So you would need to partner with a nonprofit for an event like this. Well, we also have 501c3 status, so you could check to see if CSU would qualify for that. That would be a great thing to know. And then the U-Haul will be able to fit all of the barrels, depending on what size you get. So make sure to get kind of a medium size U-Haul truck if you're going to do that. To paint or not to paint? There have been really successful workshops where folks get the education and then they receive their kit and then the barrel and they can paint it. So if you decide to do that, then of course, you'll need to get all of the extra materials. Additionally, the painted barrels might need several hours to dry, depending on the weather. Usually it has to be above 50 to be able to have any sort of paint. And the barrels have to have a primer beforehand, which I will be providing more information on that type of primer. The primer needs 30 minutes to dry, and then you can paint it. So it's a lot of additional time that you would need if you're going to offer the painting, but it is like a really fun, like maybe you could do painting with a school, which sounds amazing. Maybe you could do a 2-day kind of event where folks come and do the education, and then they can paint, leave the barrels to dry, and then come pick them up. So there's a lot of different ways that you could do it. Just wanted to give you all the information as you're doing your planning and just thinking through. Paint can come off in people's cars. And how I organize the workshops is really, how can we leave people being excited about rainwater harvesting and not being like, ugh, I left that event and now I have paint in my car, you know? So just keeping all those things in mind as you're working with community members. Day of the event. If you're offering language interpretation, make sure the interpreter is set up correctly. Make sure all the barrels are rinsed out. I will be providing you with this rain barrel installation guide. So either print it or provide the link, sometimes both. Some folks do like hard copies. I highly recommend delivering your presentation before giving the barrels out, because some people might be like, thanks for the barrel. That's it. So presentation, and then you can answer questions, then do the barrels and the connection kit distribution. And then if you would like, you can paint the rain barrels as well. Any questions so far on kind of the organization piece? And then I'm going to go through the actual presentation of rain barrels to take you through how do you actually install them and how do you teach it.
So Jessica, we have one question. How do you need to rinse the barrels out if you are going to go that route? And do you use anything to disinfect them?
So I have at the end of the presentation, I have like a little formula for cleaning them, but I just use a sprayer hose to clean out the barrels. And then also, you know, where do you clean them? How do you clean them? Where does that water go? And making sure it's not going like down the storm drain for when you, depending on what's in them. So I have done large rain barrel rinses at Spur, at the Denver Spur location. And we had this, like, there is called the water tap in there. And so it's like in a large space and you can have water that then will be treated afterwards. So that's where we rinsed ours out. I also have done them like in a yard so that water will be absorbed. I did rain barrel distributions like at my house. And so I washed a lot of rain barrels at my house. But anyway, just be sure of when you're rinsing them, just where that water will go. The formula that I have, if it just has like syrup, Coca-Cola syrup in it, I would just rinse it with water. Not that big of a deal. The soy sauce is pungent and that has some staying power. And so I use like baking soda and vinegar is what I do to clean out some of the barrels as well. That will not fully take out the soy sauce. So what I do when I'm talking to folks and I'm like, hey, you know what? We are saving these from the landfill. We're upcycling. The plants don't care if it has a soy sauce smell. It's not that big of a deal. But giving people that heads up, I find, has been very helpful instead of people being surprised that they are now getting a barrel that smells like soy sauce.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we move forward?
All right, we have one more. Does the estimated 10 hours include the washing / rinsing of barrels and pickup, etc.? Sorry, 10 hours of hosting time. Thanks, Retta.
Well, it depends how many barrels need to be washed. I would say that's an ish. The 10 hours would be for like the marketing, the hosting of the actual event, which I would put 2 hours at. Getting the location, and then if you have to rinse all 30 barrels, I would tack on another couple of hours if you're doing it alone. But if you have a lot of people doing it, then it doesn't take that long. And then if you also need to go get the barrels, it also depends where do you need to get them from. So if you're farther from a place that you're picking them up, then that will add time as well. But I have found it very helpful to divide and conquer, to have someone who is rinsing or someone who picked them up is not the same person who would be the one rinsing them, etc.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So next is the presentation that you will be receiving. And I'm going to talk you through how I present the rain barrel workshop. And then again, you can make those changes as you have them, or if you have content that you already present on that you want to include, of course, feel free. So I start by framing, why are we talking about water conservation? Why is it important? And it's important based on, we have decreased water availability in Colorado. A lot of folks move here from different parts of the country or out of the country who might not necessarily have the same water issues that we have here. And so by talking with folks about how we need to conserve and protect our water because we have less and less water, especially in drought years. And speaking as someone who moved here from Texas, there's a lot of increases in population. People who move here love it and stay. I mean, who wouldn't want to stay in Colorado? It's so beautiful. But as we have increases in population, then there's more and more demand for water. Additionally, climate change is really impacting the amount of rainfall and precipitation and snow we receive annually. And also not only how much snow we receive, because the Colorado River, the water that we receive from the Colorado River, being a headwater state where the Colorado River starts, is 100% dependent on snowpack or snow. And so if we are receiving less snow than we were anticipating, then there's less water in the river. Climate change is also impacting how quickly the snow melts. So if we typically see the snow melting in June, and then because of increased temperatures, we're seeing it in May, then that's really putting a stress on our water systems as well. Additionally, we have high water use. The average person in the United States uses 160 approximately to 200 gallons per day. And in Colorado specifically, in the summer, half of that approximately is used on outdoor irrigation. And that is because of a lot of our homes are built with Kentucky bluegrass. It's also called turf grass. Right now, for all of you and in your information, there's a lot of programs that are incentivizing removing Kentucky bluegrass and paying people to remove it, and also putting restrictions on how it can be installed in new builds. So there's just a lot more momentum around conserving water in our landscapes, recognizing that at the household level, 50% of our water is used outdoor. So to give people perspective on this, I talk about lawn water use, and about 100 square feet, which is roughly the size of an SUV, will use about 124 to 186 gallons of water per week, depending on if you water it 2 or 3 times per week. And that doesn't sound like very much water, but I'm going to go back here, but if for the city of Fort Collins, we say there's approximately 70,000 homes, and each of those homes have about an SUV size patch of grass, which we know that most homes have more than that. We're using over 13 million gallons of water per week. So for the presentation that you'll have, you can put your city in, the approximate number of homes, and do the same thing with gallons per week. When I have delivered this presentation, a lot of people have been really surprised to hear that number. And when I talk about water, water is so easy to not be connected to how much we use. With water, we typically don't notice when it works and only notice when it doesn't. And so if you go to your sink and you turn it on and there's no water, you're just like, oh my gosh, why isn't there water? But then not understanding how much we use. It's not like the gas pump where you can see how many gallons you're using. There's this really big disconnect in water. So I find it helpful to kind of connect that for folks. Additionally, CSU Extension in 2014 created these percentages where 50% of our water we use at the household level is for outdoor use, but then indoor, we're using a lot as well. So the toilet, the shower, etc. I also talk about leaks. So there's a lot of water that's lost to leaks. And I had a little bit of property a while ago with my husband, and I lost a bet where he brought home 19 baby goats one time. And one of the goats turned on the water spigot in the field full blast, and it was on all day. And you can imagine me working in water conservation and the horror that I was feeling in this moment. It was so much water that the water provider thought our meter was broken. And so after that event, I signed up to receive a smart meter, which a lot of municipalities and water providers are changing to now. So they're called different things, but it's an app. There's an app for that. And you can get notifications of leaks that happen at your house. And you can set it to like what level and how much is a leak and all of that so that you can fix them immediately. And it also helps to manage your water bill. So when you're providing this information, I think it's really helpful for folks to know that that is something that they can sign up for, potentially. I really love this graphic of water being wasted from what I was just mentioning about kind of this disconnect for how much water we use. But now that we know there's a problem, there are ways to fix that, address that. WaterSense products, and that's a link, are certified through a third party to ensure the water efficiency standards, and they have a lot of different products, which include toilets, shower heads, faucets, irrigation controllers, and the local municipalities and water providers a lot of times are offering grants and rebates for folks to switch out those high water use appliances to those WaterSense products. Additionally, Resource Central, which is located in Boulder, but they partner with water providers all across Colorado, and they have a lot of different discounts that folks could participate in. So maybe it's a garden in a box, which is a garden that has a planting layout, low water gardens, and a lot of times the water providers will offer a discount on those, but they also have turf removal programs. They have free water education, landscape seminars. So they're a great resource to look into as well. Additionally, a lot of water providers are providing those grants to install the low water or xeric landscaping. Definitely the larger providers, the smaller providers, I'm not sure, but this is something that folks can also learn more about and see if they qualify. And then additionally, the indoor water rebates too. So why rainwater harvesting? What is rainwater harvesting? Rainwater harvesting is the collecting, storing, and putting rainwater runoff to use at your house. And it's easy to do using your existing gutter system. In other states, like Arizona, a lot of times homes don't have gutters because of the amount of rainfall they receive. But here in Colorado, the majority of homes will have those gutters and downspouts because of snow. But folks who come from other parts of the country or out of the country might not know what those are or how to use them. So I really like this image of this home because the horizontal parts of this roof are called the gutters, and then the vertical are the downspouts. And on this particular image, all of the gutters and downspouts go to one location on the house. And that means that this house is probably having a problem, that they're having water potentially go into their basement if they have one. It might be causing it's going right on their foundation. It's causing it to sink. And so with rainwater harvesting, the way that I talk about it a lot is how do we turn a problem into an opportunity? How can we use that water instead of having it create all these issues for the home? So that spot is perfect for a rain barrel or two. Additionally, rainwater is free. We can reduce the demand that we have for that treated drinking water from municipalities so you don't have to use as much, help you save money on your water bills, and plants love rainwater. In some areas, the municipal drinking water systems have a lot of salt in them, especially in the lower basin states like Arizona, California. And so in those areas, I keep referencing Arizona because I got my rainwater harvesting certification there initially. But there's a lot of salt in the water, which the irrigation can kill the plants. So they're doing a lot of rainwater harvesting and using of that water to flush out the soil. And so that's an additional benefit. Additionally, in helping folks to understand why we should do rainwater harvesting, a lot of it comes down to how do we think about the rain? How have we grown up talking about the rain, learning about the rain? And I grew up with the nursery rhyme, rain, rain, go away, come again a different day. It's, you know, when it rains, we have to cancel our plans. We can't go outside. It's a bummer when it rains. But how can we change that viewpoint, kind of that mentality, to view rain as a resource, to be excited when it rains, to be a happy corgi and run around outside? And in my house, whenever it rains, we run around house to or window to window, and we're excited about how much rain we have filling up the rain barrels and for the plants. One question that I get a lot is, okay, Jessica, well, rainwater harvesting sounds great, but we don't get enough water in Colorado to really do rainwater harvesting. Isn't that something that should be done in like Oregon? So I'll go back to that one in a minute, but in Fort Collins, we get about 15 inches per year, and 1 inch of rain on a 1,000 square foot roof will yield about 623 gallons of water. And that is more than enough water to fill up a rain barrel and over 9,000 gallons per year from that section of roof. So in your slides, if you would like to include this, you can put the rainfall in your city and just help people see how much water we receive from the rain that can be used. You can, with water from your rain barrel, you can put it on your food production gardens, in pots, if you have greenhouses, or to do establishment of native plants in your other gardens. I'll be talking about the food production gardens in frequently asked questions, but just to say, I do use rainwater on my garden with a couple of caveats. There are two main types of rainwater harvesting systems: passive systems, which just direct and slow down the flow of water, but don't store it. And this is passive systems can collect way more water. And an example of this is rain gardens. I did not include a lot on rain gardens for the slides that you will be receiving, but I will say that I'll be including a link to the website, and here in a moment in the next slide, I'll show you what resources we have there. And then active systems are collecting and storing water for future use. So it rains, we collect the water. After it stops raining, we can use it. Because I received funding to do this project, you can learn more with the QR code and link to our website. But in thinking about if people are removing their grass, what do they put there instead? What do they do? So we partnered to be with the horticulture department at CSU to create plant by number designs with planting layouts, a rain garden installation guide, free rain garden recordings, and currently partnering with Darren Davidson, if you know Darren, who is fantastic, doing an online certificate as well. So if you would like more information about what those are, or if you would like to learn more about rain gardens or schedule a rain garden training, please let me know. Okay, so Colorado, rain barrel regulations. In 2016, rainwater harvesting was legalized for the very first time. A lot of people that I talk to think that it still is illegal. I'll get kind of two different comments. One is, it was illegal, and the other one is, isn't it still illegal? So having information about the law and regulations is very important and helpful. It was passed in 2016 with a couple of restrictions. One is you can have a maximum of 2 rain barrels with the combined storage capacity of 110 gallons or less. So according to this law, you couldn't have 3 40-gallon rain barrels. It's just the way that it was set up. So because of this, I recommend, 55-gallon barrels to maximize that total amount that you can collect. You need to use it for outdoor purposes, so watering your plants, gardens, lawns. It has to have a sealable lid to prevent mosquito breeding. You know, we don't want huge containers filled with water just having that mosquito issue, so that's why they need to be sealed. And then do not drink or cook with water from a rain barrel. I have gotten questions around like, can we water our chickens or our horse with rain barrel water? And I do not recommend that because the contaminants that are on top of your roof, let's say it's ash, those fires, it's bird droppings, it could be leaves, etc. Whatever is on our roof. It could also be particulates from your asphalt shingles or whatever type of roof material you have. And that gets into your barrel and it sits there. And so while it's safe to use on your plants, you do not want to use that for any animals or of course humans, because that's not treated and it can make folks really sick. I included this one. This might be relevant in the areas that you are in. So if people have a residential well permit, there's actually no restriction on how much you can collect. So if this is something that folks in your area would be interested in learning more about, I have a link to the rooftop precipitation collection permit and more information from the Division of Water Resources. Along the Front Range, we don't have a lot of that, but in the mountains, that tends to be more prevalent. Additionally, homeowners associations. So in the rainwater harvesting law, it has specifically in there that homeowners associations cannot prevent folks from installing a rain barrel, but sometimes they think they can. So I always recommend checking with an HOA before purchasing a rain barrel because they might have aesthetic requirements like this one where it has to be the same color as the house. Maybe you have to put it in the backyard versus the front yard. But it's important for people to know that they can, in fact, install the rain barrel and that the HOAs cannot prevent that. Additionally, winterization is needed. So just like your current sprinkler system for like your grass, when it gets cold, you need to empty it. And I'll be talking about that as well. But these barrels, when they're full, are over 500 pounds. And if they are not winterized, then they can crack. And then you have to go through the process again. And then spigot placement. So spigots are where the water comes out of the rain barrel. And on this picture, it's the red spigot here at the bottom. And so making sure that you can access that spigot. So when you're installing your rain barrel, it's really important not to put the spigot like pointing towards the house or in a tight spot where it's going to be very difficult to put a bucket there or to hook up a hose. And then overflow planning as well. So once your barrel fills up and it rains again, where does that extra water go? So it's important to have a plan for that and make sure that the overflow, depending on the type of barrel you get, it depends on how it's set up, making sure that overflow does not go towards your house and create a problem. Was there an additional question in the chat, Michaela?
Yeah, so we actually had a question about gutters. So for folks who don't have gutters, is there a resource to refer them to either DIY, so how to install gutters, grants to get gutters, I guess, get them installed, and then or a professional gutter installation. So I don't know if you have.
So it could be what I've seen in some homes is that they have a gutter but no downspout. And so in those cases, you can do rain chains, which they can be cheaper. They cannot be cheaper. You know, it really depends. And so are there grants? The person who asked this, can you tell me where you're located? That's okay. So I'm happy to talk with you more about this afterwards. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you can look through your local like city or county to see if there are opportunities to get grants there. Maybe partnering with a nonprofit to see what sorts of like neighborhood events are going on. If it's a neighborhood grant, then that could be a part of the cost of installing rain barrels in that neighborhood area. Or if you are looking for a grant, let's say that you are at a county office or an extension office and that you are looking for a grant, writing that in instead of just having materials be only rain barrels and connection kits, having that supplies being just a little bit more open to say that is making sure that the rain barrels can be installed, you know, extra supplies for downspouts, etc.
Okay, so yeah, interestingly, okay, so that was from Gilpin. Interestingly, Jennifer Cook says many don't have gutters because of the heavy snow load. So I didn't realize that was, yeah, wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what I would do in those cases is maybe look at a certain section of the house. So even if they're not gutters, I'm sure that the roofs are pitched in a direction to have the water go more concentrated in a certain area. So I've also seen rain barrels where you're putting a barrel underneath kind of that pitch where there is more water flowing to one section. So let's talk more after this to see how I can best support your community and offer some ideas and resources that might be more helpful.
And I just want to point out, if folks are trying to get to the links on the Zoom call, they won't work, but we will make sure that you get the presentation files with all of those active links.
Yes, yes, thank you. Okay, so there are multiple rain barrel types, and wanting you all to be aware for yourself or for the folks that you're working with that they will see these out as they're looking at potential rain barrels, and just to be aware of these. So the one on the far left is like a terracotta looking rain barrel, and these have been, you know, popular. They look nice, they're fun, they're expensive as well. But there are two different things on this barrel with the arrows here. The first one is the top of the barrel has an indention. The intention of this indention is to put a plant there, but it is shallow. And so if you don't have a plant, or even if you do, that will hold water and mosquitoes. That's like perfect for mosquitoes. So just be aware of that. Secondarily, the spigot height on this one is very high. So you are going to only be able to access the water above the spigot. So you want to make sure that where the water is coming out, the spigot is as low as possible so that you can use that water. Additionally, the next one is a screen. It has this largely only screen top. And these I have seen is where you would just, as I was kind of talking about before, you would just put that underneath an area that might not have a downspout, or you would cut a downspout and then have it go this type of barrel underneath it. So the screens, they're going to have mosquitoes. I mean, you can't make a screen for the water to go through small enough, because if it's that small, it'll clog really quickly. So typically with these screens, you'll still have mosquitoes getting into your barrel. Additionally, you're letting a lot of sunlight in, and so these would tend to have more algae growth in them. The next image is of it has a partially closed top, but also a screen in the very center, and those holes are very large and will definitely have insects going into your water. The next image is of a rain barrel that has a top that kind of comes off to the side. And so according to the law, you have to have a sealable lid. So technically this lid can be sealable, but you would have to remove it every time it rains and then put it back on after it rains. And that's a huge pain, and I don't want that for anyone. So I don't recommend having these types of barrels where it takes a lot of active work to be able to maintain them. This other barrel, which the orange barrel here, it has the downspout going directly into the barrel. I've seen these a lot in other states and some here as well. So just something to be aware of is with these type that go directly into the barrel, what has happened is they have cut the downspout to then put the rain barrel underneath it. Because you need to winterize it, you need to remove that barrel and for the winter, then you have a cut downspout and you have to put something there to extend it so that you don't have the water running right against your foundation all winter. So these are more, they make more sense in areas that don't freeze personally. Additionally, because there's no diverter, these tend to be dirtier. So all of the leaves, all of the pine needles, the sediment will enter into this barrel and be at the bottom. And so then because it's filling up with all of those materials, it's reducing the amount of water that you can store in them. So for those reasons, I just recommend not cutting your downspout in Colorado and using a diverter system, which we'll talk about in a minute. The final image is, it looks like those foam connections that you can put to make a floor for like kids. I've seen this one and I was like, oh, that's interesting because you can make it different shapes. People might like how it's square, but do not buy this for your own sanity. What's inside is essentially a large plastic bag, like a baggie, but gigantic and impossible to clean. I mean, it would just be very, very difficult to keep this system working well. So be cautious of these. The type that I do recommend are with a diverter. So it's easy to clean out. It's simple to install. Additionally, the overflow, so when it rains and it fills up your barrel completely and then it rains again, the water will go out the existing downspout. Let me see if I can get the laser pointer here. Okay, so the water will enter here, and because this is level, we'll talk about that in a minute. When the water fills up the barrel, it will just go down the downspout like normal. So you don't have to do any additional overflow planning for a diverter. These are just including in my presentation is where to purchase the barrels, which you've already covered. And then here are the materials that you need. You need that 55-gallon barrel. If you might be able to find a cheaper diverter kit than the Colorado Rain Catcher kit, but something really important to make sure of is that it has a hole saw in it. And the hole saw is what you will use to drill into your barrel to then put the spigot and the gaskets and the connector pieces onto your barrel. I have purchased these kits before and they don't have those hole saws. And then I've had to go try to figure out what size is this gasket, try to find the correct hole saw at like Home Depot or Lowe's, and it's a pain because if you get a slightly too large hole saw, then the whole thing will leak. So I highly recommend purchasing a kit that already has that hole saw in them. You will need a drill to be able to install these components, gloves because you will be doing some drilling into, well, first of all, safety. Second of all, you'll also be drilling into metal, so eye protection. You'll need a level. We need to ensure that the connector tube from the downspout to the barrel is completely level. Tape measure, pencil, and wrench. I've had folks ask me if they can use metal barrels for their rain barrels, and it's possible. But what you have to do, because here you can see that there's rusting on the metal barrels, which is always an issue. What you would have to do is get plastic paint and paint the inside and the outside of the barrel to prevent the rust. And it's very expensive. And by that point, you should have just probably purchased a plastic one. So while it's possible, and if people want to do that, they can, it's just, I think, a lot more, it's easier and more cost effective in the long run just to get a plastic one. People might find, or you might encounter when you are doing this, there's two different types. They have these screw tops where there's two, and this barrel does not, the lid does not come off, but you can unscrew these to be able to rinse them out. And then there's some that have a fully removable lid, and those tend to be, of course, more expensive, but both work great. And it just depends what you can find, what's most effective for for your event as well. And these upcycled barrels might need additional cleaning. With the earth-minded diverter, that's the same diverter with the Colorado rain catcher one, but the earth-minded diverter is what you potentially might have at your extension offices. The pros are it's easy to install, it's cost effective, the kit includes the hole saw and spigot, you don't have to cut the downspout or remove it to install it. But the cons are that you can't see the clogs because the diverter itself is inside the downspout, and so you can't tell if it's clogged. And it also has a small opening in the middle of it, which has the potential, for example, if you were to install your rain barrel underneath a tree. Pine needles are the worst. So if it's underneath a pine tree or a tree with large leaves, then you might have the potential for more clogging. With the smaller pieces, they just go right through that hole in the center, but if they're larger, then they can clog it. If it does clog, you can just remove the screws, and we'll see some images here in a moment, and then unclog it and put it back in. It is straightforward, but again, just making sure people know they won't be able to see the clog. Any questions so far? You are muted.
Yes, I am. I don't see any any in the chat. So
Okay,
yeah.
great. So now we're to the installation piece. First thing you need to do is choose a location. Highly recommend walking around your location, the house that you're in, to find all of the downspouts. You might be surprised, like I was when I walked around my house, of finding out there's a lot of downspouts on the house. So by seeing how many there are, and in the case where there aren't downspouts, of course, that creates another challenge in conversation. But first thing, find out if you have downspouts and where they are located. Next, think about where you will use the water. You want to install the rain barrels as close as possible to where you'll be using it. And then thinking, how could you reduce the irrigation that you're using if you were to put one there? Some folks, like I did this too, is I installed a rain barrel not close to where I wanted to use it. And I was like, oh, I'll get my steps in. But then it also means that if it's hard to use, people are less likely to use it. So putting it as close as possible is the best way. Additionally, how easy is it to make a flat area for the barrel? The base of the barrel has to be flat. So you might have a downspout that's right next to your garden and it's great, but it's on a large slope. And so then you just need to pick a spot. It's more important to pick a spot that's level than to have the proximity, because rain barrels, when they're full, they're 500 pounds. And if they fall over, they can rip off your downspout and cause a lot of problems. Also, thinking about where can you collect more water. So in this example at this house, there are these two different locations for the downspouts. On this downspout, the only water is collecting in this small area of roof, but on this downspout, it's this entire area of roof. So that's another consideration of if where you're installing it can not only be where the location is, but how much water is going there. And if you're really interested in getting the satellite view and seeing your house from the rooftop, you can Google your address, or I shouldn't say Google it. You can search for your address in a search engine, and then you can click the layers button and then zoom into the top of the house. And then you can get a bird's eye view of what that looks like to see how much roof area is going to each individual downspout. The base, when you create the base, there's a couple of reasons why you would want to create the base. First off, rainwater does not have water pressure. So if you see the water towers, if you're driving around and you see a water tower, water is elevated to create that water pressure. So the water will come out of the barrel very slowly, if you do not elevate it and create that pressure. So what you'll find is that you'll have the water will come out faster when it's full and slower when it's empty. So creating that, elevating it on that base is helping to create that water pressure. Additionally, it also makes it easier to access the spigot, to be able to put a bucket or connect a hose underneath it. So in these photos here, right here on the left, there is a rain barrel with no base, and you can see that the spigot would be, you couldn't put anything underneath it. Very, very difficult. In the image on the right, it has been elevated, and then it can, even a 5-gallon bucket will actually fit underneath this one. When you're selecting the flat location, it doesn't have to be on concrete. I've also installed bases on dirt, but you just need to make sure that it is flat, and that if you have brought more dirt in or are adjusting it for slope, just make sure that it is tamped down, that you have that the soil will settle. And so once it settles, you want to make sure that you're not going to have an issue where your base is no longer level. There are commercially available rain barrel stands. I just want to caution you all not to get ones that look like a stool with 3 legs, especially if it's going to be on soil, because then it has a high likelihood of falling over. My favorite materials to use, even though they're not fancy, are cinder blocks. They are standard size. They're a great height. I know that I need exactly 4.5 cinder blocks per 55-gallon rain barrel to make that base. So, and they are very economic to purchase them. So, but you can also use wood or bricks or patio pavers, supplies that you have. Again, just that caution, I've had to rebuild bases with some bricks if they're different sizes and shapes, and it's just, it just takes a little bit of pressure for all of it to fall over. This was a picture of, in my presentations, I like to use a lot of photos to show people that anybody can install these. I'm not handy, or I wasn't when I first started this. I was very nervous about using a drill. This picture is from my first drill into a rain barrel. I was very excited, but also very nervous. So really, once people have the instructions, anyone can do it, or anyone will have the knowledge to be able to do it. Highly recommend sitting on the rain barrel. It gives you greater control, and it won't move as you're drilling it. So the first thing to do when you're doing your first drilling for your spigot, which is where the water comes out, and you're using the smallest gasket. So this is from looking in your particular kit. You'll need to make sure that you follow the instructions in your kit. The instructions that I'm sharing are from the Colorado Rain Catcher kit, so they might look slightly different from what you have. But the smallest gasket is for the spigot. So measure 3 inches from the bottom of the barrel, make a mark using the smallest hole saw, drill into the barrel, and then you want to put the smallest gasket in right away, because this is the most difficult to get in. And when the plastic is warm, then it's easier to put the gasket in. I also recommend using dish soap around the outside of the gasket to help get it in as well. It will take more pressure than you think to get that one in. Make sure to screw on the spigot after you've already put the gasket into the barrel, otherwise it will not go in. And finally, make sure that your spigot is closed after you finish your installation. The spigots that I use look like a T, like as pictured in this image here, but this other spigots can look different. So in this particular image, if it looks like a T, then it is closed. If it's in line, then it is open. So I took this photo like, okay, for my presentations, I'm going to show them that it needs to be closed. And then for some reason, I opened it, and then it rained and all of the water came out. So as people are installing it, just make sure your final step is to close that gasket. Then you need to install the intake hole where the water will come into the barrel. So you will measure 3 inches from the top of the barrel. You will use the medium hole saw according to your kit instructions. drill the hole centered on the mark and then insert the small rubber fitting. What I have found from the barrels, and just so that folks know, is that the amount of plastic at the bottom of the barrel and the top of the barrel is different. It is thinner at the bottom and thicker at the top. So you might be surprised when you're doing your drilling to be like, why isn't it going through? It's because it's a lot thicker. The medium hole saw, or the intake hole gasket, is a lot easier to put in and more flexible. But if you need to put soap on it, that's also how you can get it into that space easier. After you have installed your, oh, I'm going to go back for a second to where the water will be coming in the intake hole. Before you drill your intake hole, make sure you know where you're going to install your barrel, because the intake hole has to be on the same side as the downspout. That is because the pipe that you receive to connect the downspout to your barrel is only about 2.5 feet. So you want to make sure that that distance of that pipe is as small as possible so that it doesn't bow and create an issue of water getting into your barrel. So only drill the intake hole, or the for the water to come into your barrel, on the same side as that downspout. And then once you have installed that connection piping, which is here, that tubing right here, what I do is I put the piping on the barrel first. This is harder to get in than you would imagine. I definitely put in soap on this to put that and connect them to the intake valve. And I even use downward pressure by sitting on the barrel to get that one in. And then once you have that, then use a level to determine where you're going to drill the final hole, which is into the downspout, using the largest hole saw. And you always need to measure your downspout, because it could be 2 by 3 or 3 by 4. You always have to drill on the 3-inch side. And when you're placing your barrel, place the spigot facing out. Again, that's so that you can access that water. So you don't want to have that spigot oriented where you just can't access it. The fill tube, so this fill tube has to be level with the intake. So the diverter to the intake, because which is kind of counterintuitive potentially. If you install it too high, so if the rain barrel is here and the hole is here, the water will fill, the rain barrel will fill up, but water will not go uphill. So once it's full, the water cannot go out the downspout. If you put it too low, the water will never enter into your barrel. And so I have installed barrels that I've put it too high, and then what happens is the water comes out the top of it and right next to my house, which was special for me to find that out. Be sure that you use your eye protection to drill into the downspout. Now, an additional piece of information is that most downspouts are aluminum, but I have encountered through my many rain barrel installations that some of them are actually steel. These hole saws can drill through steel, but you're going to feel like you're going to set your house on fire. And they will go through that hole saw very quickly. There are hole saws that are made for steel, and so I now have that in my kit. So if you are going to have for example, in Denver, they have a program through Groundwork Denver that students, youth go and install rain barrels in a neighborhood. So if you were to do like an installation project, I would highly recommend you getting a steel drill bit, so that in case you encounter that. Use the hole saw to drill into the 3-inch side. You do need to have some pressure on it and try to make sure it's as level as possible so that you're not, only cutting through one side of that circle. Additionally, you'll receive this metal kind of piece at the very end. It looks like it's a very flat piece of metal. If your downspout goes into the ground, so sometimes you can see the end of your downspout and sometimes they're connected to a pipe that goes underground. If it goes underground, what you need to do is to remove the screws that are connecting it to the underground pipe and just offset it. So that if this little piece of metal goes down your downspout as you're cutting it, it doesn't clog and go underground. That would be very difficult to remove. Then when you're installing the diverter, it looks like a cup. So you want to have it the arrow facing up. It's very squeezable, it's rubber, and then insert that into the hole. It has 2 screws to connect it to the downspout. And you want to make sure it's completely flush and inserted all the way in. It has a little ridge around the outside right here. So you'll think it's completely flat, but it won't quite be. So it needs to give another push and you'll hear a pop for it to be installed all the way. And then when you secure the screws, these are self-tapping screws. So typically when you're screwing in to like wood, you'll feel it stop. The screw will stop. You can't screw it in anymore. But with a downspout, since it's metal, how you'll know that it's completely into the metal is that you'll see the metal pop up to it to be flush. It's going to make sense when you're actually doing it. So when you put the screw in, you'll kind of make an indentation. And then once it's fully connected to the diverter, it'll pop back up to it. So I'm going to try to go through this quickly. I'm an educator and tend to be lengthy, so apologies. I know we're almost at 2:30. And so I can stay to answer questions afterwards, and you'll receive all of these notes as well. So some potential issues to look for are if your water is coming over your downspout, that means your gutter, water's coming over your gutter, it means there's a clog. So recommend checking to see if you have any clogs in the actual gutter with like leaves or things like that. Or if that's all clear, it might be in your diverter. You can connect 2 barrels together. What you would need to do for this is you would install the barrel the exact same way as I just described for the first barrel. And then you need an extra connection hose for the second barrel. And you want to install this connection hose about 1 inch below where you have your intake hose connection, because the way the water will fill it up is this barrel will fill up first to here. Then this barrel will fill up, then it'll fill up the remainder of the way and then go down the down the downspout. The connector kits are available through Colorado Raincatcher as well. So if you have 2 barrels, you can install them in multiple locations or in 1 location. Winterizing, just remove the barrel. You can leave it in place if you want to. My barrels are in places that are really windy, and so they have blown away. So you can store them, but if that's not an issue, you can leave them in place. Rinse out any debris, remove that tubing, and then you will place a winterization cap. So take out the diverter, and then it's a flat cap that you will just screw on using the same screws that you used for the diverter. When you're installing the barrel, I highly recommend cleaning out the gutters before connecting it. That will help keep your rain barrel cleaner. Gutter covers aren't necessary, but that can help if that's something folks are interested in. And then rinse out the barrel at the end of each season to help keep it clean and help prevent the algae growth and have it ready for the next season. And then finally, really recommend using the water in your barrel because with the restrictions that we have in Colorado of the 110 gallons, it's not only 110 gallons for the whole season. So as you use the water, it's 110 and 110 and 110. So as you use it, you can have it ready to fill up the next rainstorm. Here is that little formula that I was mentioning earlier about how to clean your barrel. And then as far as decorating goes, this is make sure to use a primer, and that's the primer that takes 30 minutes to dry. And it has to be a plastic paint primer or the paint will not stick to it. You can, after you prime it, then you can use an acrylic or artistic paint, and then you'll need to use a paint sealer. For my house, we used a chalkboard paint so that it could be decorated over and over and over, and that has been really fun too. So here are some examples. The painting is really fun and creative. There's a lot of different ways that that can be done. You can spend a lot of time on Pinterest finding all of the great ideas that exist and ways that it can be painted. Finally, the question I get to in 2020, I had a lot of time on my hands. You might have as well, but I counted how many times I was able to fill up my rain barrel, and I filled it 11 times. So again, kind of that to that point of you can use it over and over and over. I want to be cognizant of time. And so the final thing I will say is that I will be sending you all of these resources afterwards. And please let me know if there's something that you don't see in the resources section that would be helpful to you in planning your event. And I'm really grateful that all of you are interested in providing these workshops to the community. And like I said, I am just seeing this great interest and need to offer these in multiple locations. So really appreciate you being here today and just want to help that be successful. And these are what you'll be receiving. And then here's my contact information as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. So I'm super excited to host a rain barrel class now.
Wonderful.
Yay. So we do have a few questions. Is there a preference for the north side of the house or concern about rainwater storage getting really hot if it's in full sun?
Yes, the water will heat up, but I don't think it's necessarily a problem. I haven't had that be an issue. The only thing is the more sun exposure it has, the more it might grow algae, even if it is painted. So yeah, but if it's a great spot for you to put your rain barrel, please put it there and don't worry too much about that issue. And if it's like really, really hot, I guess, then that might have issues for your plants. But again, I haven't really encountered that before.
Excellent. Thank you. And then one more question. Oh, couple. So one more question. Have you seen success with people using the barrels with irrigation timers? Of course, accounting for times where there may not be water in the barrel.
Oh my gosh, so many cool tools that you can use on that Blue Barrel website where you can hook up your barrel to an irrigation. It can be an inline emitter or it can be like a bubble emitter. I would not recommend having a soaker hose just because, again, the water pressure in a barrel is different. So there's lots of ways that you can do that. Of course, you have to have the water in the barrel to be able to irrigate it. So I tell folks like, it's not like your irrigation system that you can just set and it comes on no matter what. The type of timers that you can use, the irrigation timers, are more like an egg timer. So you would go out and set it for an hour and then it shuts off. Those are also available, I think, on that Blue Barrel website, like, Amazon or etc. can find that too. But again, just make sure that there's that water in there. And I think having those would be really, if that is something you want to do, connecting two barrels together to have more water available in them would be, I think, helpful for that.
Awesome. Thank you. One question. So the Gilpin folks, how can we get information or connect with you about non-gutter houses for rainwater collection?
Yes, so you can email me with my contact information here, or if you have a little bit of time to stay on, I can also, after I answer the rest of the questions and stop the recording, can also talk to you more about that.
Awesome. So that was, those are all the questions in the chat. I would say if you have other questions, please just go ahead and unmute since we're at the end. All right, and I will go ahead and stop the recording.
Great. Yeah, that sounds great. Well, again, thank you all so much if you have to head out. And I'm so glad. Thank you, Emily, for your feedback and excited to see how many workshops are popping up in the future.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.